This is the full podcast between SNEAKO and uh, who is she? Oh, Lauren. Uh, I don't know. Yeah, maybe Lauren. Her name is Lauren. Okay, let's watch together this podcast.
Stay busy, and then it's good to be back in Miami and be able to sit at the desktop and get some interviews in.
Nice. I saw that you were unbanned from Twitch, so congratulations on that.
Hey, we could collab on Twitch. You still have your Twitch, right?
No, so I've actually never streamed on Twitch. I feel like I'm kind of too old for it. Like I don't know, like that's a whole different world that I'm used to. I think it's a good idea to be on it. I know Lauren Southern tried because from what I understand, any politics on there is basically it's like a left wing echo chamber, but I think she ended up getting banned
Is
before
she
long.
is she a leftist? I don't know much about her. Like people in the political space talk about her. I know nothing about this lady.
Lauren Southern, no, she's not a leftist. She used to be, I think, harder right than she is now, but no, she's definitely not a leftist. She criticizes feminism, mass migration, stuff like that.
Okay, well, Pokimane is she's 28. How old are you?
I'm 29. Okay, so
Okay, so you're not too old. She's like the biggest female Twitch streamer, and you're the same age. So you could if you wanted to, but highly recommend Rumble instead. But that was a
yeah,
big
no,
one.
we actually did. We recently started uploading to Rumble as well. So yeah.
Oh, that's good. So you can is that accredited to me or was that just a plan from beforehand?
No, I mean you're definitely part of that just because I feel like there's more and more. The problem with Rumble, I think originally was it was kind of just only people who had been like really into right-wing politics because I think Dan Bongino was part of its founding, so it wasn't general interest, it was really niche, but there's more and more people who are on there who aren't just right-wing politics, which I think makes it more of a viable alternative to YouTube. So
Okay, so hey Chris, if you're watching, then part of that could be accredited to me. I'm sure he'll be happy about that. But yeah, you've been pretty busy since the last time we spoke. You had that debate on Tim Pool. I saw you were on. They texted me that you were on some other shows as well. What's been the biggest change since we last spoke?
So I think the biggest change is probably that spoke to Pearl in person, at, like you said, on the Culture War, which is Tim's debate show specifically. That was a lot of fun. And let's see, I think I also spoke to, I don't know if you're familiar with Andrew Wilson, spoke with him as
Yeah,
well.
I met him recently too.
Um,
He's a good guy, good Christian. Oh, see, your
yeah,
focus on your camera's on. I could your camera thing.
yeah. So I think that will go away eventually. I'm sorry that
Don't worry about it.
that should it should just stop eventually. I'm sure there's a way where I can like more purposefully stop it, but it will tire itself out. But yeah, the Pearl debate was interesting, and I feel like I understand Pearl a lot better, and but I think it's interesting that I feel like lately she talks more about specifically like who she calls trad cons than like almost feminists at this point. And I feel like the distinction she has there is that she's really secular in her argumentation. Like she frames it as she doesn't talk about what should be, it's just what is. But you can tell that what she believes is, she's still coming from it from a secular moral standpoint instead of a Christian standpoint. And I think that's why there's amongst the Christian sphere, there's a lot of people who criticize Pearl. And I know she calls them like basically trad feminists, but there's a lot of guys like Michael Knowles, and I don't know if you're familiar with Trent Horn, he's a Catholic apologist, who also disagree with her. So it's just been kind of interesting to me to, I guess, try to understand a little bit more where she's coming from and her perspective.
I think it's I had a debate with her as well. I think it's really just kind of pointless to say like, oh, I talk about what is rather than what should be. Like, then what's the point? You're just saying
Right. And
thing
I
like,
also, sorry, go ahead.
yeah, it's just a waste of time. Like you're gonna say that everything's fucked. Like we can acknowledge that something like the trad cons, I guess, haven't like there's a lot of problems with Western culture. But what do we do? Like the whole point of speaking is supposed to be towards and working towards something. So if you're just speaking and saying everything's fucked nonstop, then what are you doing? All you're doing
Right.
is
And I also,
instilling more fear into the hearts of people listening.
I don't think that's even true though, because she definitely is speaking with oughts. Like men ought to, divorce court ought to be changed. Child custody laws ought to be changed. She has a lot of oughts that she does talk about. So when she says like, oh well, I just talk about what is not what should be, that's not even accurate. She obviously has prescriptions that she's like she wants to get rid of child custody, she wants to get rid of alimony, she wants to get rid of divorce. Like that's fine. Have your your beliefs of what should change, but it's kind of a cop out to say, well, oh no, I'm not advising men. I don't have it. I'm just talking about what is. Like, you have like just if you have your own beliefs, that's fine, but just stand for it. Like be firm in it.
How did that debate go? I got to see some moments of it. There was one moment that people like to say was a gotcha. I don't think that was a gotcha. It was like which one of you were like virgins on your wedding day? But that doesn't like mean that you. Well, how did the debate go?
I think overall it went well. There are a lot of things that I wanted to talk about more that we didn't end up talking about, and I think that's usually how debates go. Something that I would have loved to spend more time on with Pearl is the idea that like women are evil, or evil comes from women, because that's something that she basically, like, I remember that came up with Andrew Wilson.
What? Evil comes from women? What the heck is going on, bro? Ah.
He believed that I was, in my references to Pearl, like on social media and videos, that I was representing her in bad faith. And, one of the things that I brought up that I disagree with Pearl is like, she actually has tweeted out evil comes from women. And according to Andrew, like, well, she means that, women are held to lesser account and whatever. He basically had this like very reasonable, this is what she actually means. But Pearl came out and said like, no, evil comes from women on her Twitter, which is fine. Like, again, like if you're going to have a belief, at least stand for it. We didn't really get to talk about that. I would have loved to go into some of the, I guess, statistics she claims backs that up, because she often says like, well, women are more likely to abuse children. But like, I would have loved to go in more of that, why that doesn't, I mean, it's basically like how the feminists say that men kill more women than bears, therefore bears are safer. You have the proximity issue. Like, women, I think, are slightly overrepresented when it comes to, like, unfortunately, like, infant murders, which is a terrible thing, disavow entirely. I think it's something like 60%. Women are more than 60% of the primary caregivers, who are basically almost solely responsible for caring for the young infants. So it's that kind of issue. Like, yes, they're overrepresented, but to take that and mean like women are just innately more murderous than men, when men are overrepresented in every single violent crime, I just think that's pretty disingenuous. And even like if we're talking about the genders, it's not even like that men period are dangerous. It's a very small subsection of men that commit the overwhelming majority of crimes. So I guess it's just like her very cursory knowledge and use of statistics. It's basically what feminists do to demonize men. I would have liked to go into that a little bit more, which we didn't really.
You didn't get to touch on. What is your? I'm wondering what your take about women are evil. It's funny asking you because you're a woman. What do you think? What do you believe?
I mean, from a Christian perspective, it's the Bible says we are created male and female. There are different roles for men and women. It doesn't really speak to one gender having more sin or more original sin than the other. Obviously, Eve was the one to eat of the apple, but simultaneously, Adam did go along with it, which is also a failure of leadership. So I don't think it's fair to say one sex is more sinful than the other. I mean, men are more violent than women, but even then, it's not all, like, it's a very small subsection of men that commits the overwhelming majority of crimes. So even when we say, like, I don't even think it's fair to say that men on average are more aggressive than women when we're talking about something like that. So I would say that men and women can be worse in different ways, for sure. I think women are more manipulative than men, especially when it comes to relationships.
Yeah.
I think, when it comes to infidelity, men historically have been more likely to have affairs. Now I think women are slightly more likely, although that's something that's changed over time. I mean, like, from a biblical perspective, it's just not like there's no basis for that. And even when we look at statistics, I don't believe there's a basis for saying women.
In the Quran too. In the Quran, actually, I think I was corrected on this, and maybe the chat can correct me if I'm wrong saying this now, but in the Bible it says that Eve bit the apple first, but I think in the Quran it says like that Adam and Eve, they both commit the sin at the same time. That it's not like there was one worse than the other. It's like they both did. So I think a lot of Christians believe that it's like it was Eve's decision, and so and even though you talk about how women are more manipulative, and that makes sense, because if they're the weaker of the two sexes, then naturally they're going to use manipulation as their form of power if it's not going to become physical. That's
also why female friendships and female like social dynamics are a lot cattier than male dynamics, male dynamics, if there's like a tension, you always kind of have like, there is the idea that you could just actually get into a fight, and a lot of guys might fight and then call it even afterwards, but females, it's a lot more backstabbing, it's social manipulation, it's like mean girl attitude, and yeah, I firmly believe women are more manipulative.
But you don't believe women are evil, do you?
I
I
think
don't.
I think humans innately are fallen, but I don't think women more so than men. Like I don't think it's fair to say evil comes from women. Let's just put it that way.
Yeah, that's it. It just seems like I think we should work towards, and this is the back and forth that I have with like red pillars. It's not specifically Pearl. This is other guy. He calls himself the Godfather of the Red Pill. He kind of said the same thing. Like, you should get a vasectomy. You should avoid women. It kind of have like this doomer mentality, because if you believe in like red pill ideology, then you believe like women are inherently evil and you should spend your whole life avoiding them. But that's not a religious standpoint at all. That has nothing to do with Christianity.
No,
That's its own religion, its own belief. If you believe in God, then you should believe that we should continue society and have children and fight the resistance that way, rather than like getting a surgery to avoid alimony.
right. And I say like that's literally civilizational ending thinking right there. So like the leftists who are getting the vasectomies because of climate change, they're like removing themselves from the gene pool. Like, yeah, if you want to do that, I'm not going to talk you out of it, because I think there's a bit of Darwinism at play here. I'm not going to try to convince doomers, atheists, leftists to procreate. Like, go ahead, remove yourself. But I think like by and large, if this is the type of mentality that's spreading, it is civilizational. Like that's going to end us. I mean, we already see that happening in Korea, especially in Japan. Like, if everyone just stops having kids, we don't have a country, we don't have a civilization anymore. And like I think just from a species standpoint, our main goal is procreation, and so to remove yourself from that, because because there is some level of risk involved with like, I don't know, having kids with someone. It's defeatist. And it's also like, again, this is why I bring up statistics. It's just not accurate. There are a lot of people who've gone into this. It's just not accurate to say like 1 in 2 marriages end in divorce. I mean, the way that they get that statistic, the way that divorce scenarios are calculated, is they take the number of marriages and the number of divorces that happen every year. Now, obviously, because the population is kind of like in an inverted triangle, there are more older people than younger people. It's not an apples to apples comparison. It's not like these studies are done tracking individual marriage cohorts over 10 years and 20 years, and that's how we come up with those numbers. It's absolutely so. It's kind of it's a skewed statistic, and also like the idea that you can do nothing to change your likelihood of divorce is also untrue. A lot of things like your education level, socioeconomic background, even your race, like these are all aspects that can affect your likelihood of divorce, whether your parents are divorced. So, even if it were true that 1 in 2 marriages end in divorce, which it's not, that's not to say that your individual likelihood of divorce is 50%. And so I wish that people talked about that more, just because, like, again, I'm not going to try to force people to get married who don't want to, especially if they're like secularists or anything like that. I don't believe in government marriage, but it's just from an accuracy standpoint, the way that marriage is being portrayed is not, it's not true.
I'm wondering. I want to ask you what you think the secret to not getting divorces, because I mean the divorce rates are high, and I like that you brought up Japan and Korea as an example, because I think even in a conversation with red pillars are like, oh, the birth rate's declining. But the countries where it's declining, there's a lack of God, right? Japan and Korea are pretty much atheistic societies. There's a little bit of Buddhism, but what do they really? They believe the universe is itself or something. Most of them aren't really practicing with that as well. You could say the result of that is I think it's the product of a society where they think nothing really matters. And you look where the birth rates are doing well and the marriage rates are successful, as a lot of it is Muslim countries, and also Russia, which is a strong Christian country where they don't compromise there. What do you think, as a married woman yourself, what is the secret to not getting divorced?
Well, I think one of the things is and this is specifically on women. Women do initiate the majority of divorces. It's not 80%. I think it's around like 60 to 70%. And of course, we can have a discussion. Just because someone initiates the divorce, are they solely responsible for the marriage breakup? Especially if you're talking about things like infidelity but whatever. I think for a lot of women nowadays, there's this idea that unless you have like those notebook sparks throughout the entire marriage, then you've basically fallen out of love and the marriage is not salvageable. I think that's a ridiculous feeling to have, that you assume you're going to be in the honeymoon phase forever. Like when you get married, it's more than just, oh, we're boyfriend girlfriend, but next level, it's a partnership that's supposed to last a lifetime. So I think you need to have a more solid foundation than just, oh, he gives me butterflies. Not that that's not good, you should have that as well,
Yeah,
but
yeah.
I think a lot of like Eastern countries, a lot of Muslim countries, they understand marriage more as a lifetime partnership and the start of a new family, not just a glorified relationship. Like it's deeper than that, it's more meaningful than that. So I think you need to have a partner.
Not Muslim country. Muslims who are real Muslim, they're doing this. They can't divorce without any reason. And okay, real Muslims are not, you know, not very desirable. Yeah, they don't marry. They don't get married for sex. They married for best partner in their life, for support them, and that's it. And practice Islam with a good way. And many people are not practicing Islam, and they're kind of, I don't know what's their mindset, but many people thinks like, oh, I should get married for you know for sex, for women, because I need women. I don't know what about women thing, what women's thing. I don't know. Okay.
That views it the same way. And also, I mean, I know Pearl, I guess, hates on like the Christian trad femmes a lot, but religiosity is an indicator of your likelihood of divorce, right? Not just whether you self-identify as Christian or whatever, but if you're actually like pious, you go to church or temple or mosque, whatever it is, that does lower your likelihood, I think, because the people like that, they tend to have a stronger foundation for what the marriage actually is. Like so, one of the conversation
Yes,
that I
of
had with Andrew
course,
Wilson, one of
obviously.
the takeaways that I thought was really interesting is that we discussed what even is marriage, and I kind of came away, thanks to Andrew, with the idea that like I'm not even going to, like, if you are a leftist, you're polyamorous, whatever, my advice to you is not, oh, well, just get a government piece of paper and that's the marriage and that's good. Like, no, absolutely not. I think you have to have a strong foundation with God, in your faith, in your morality. That is your best predictor for whether your marriage is going to work out. Like, it's not, don't put your hope on a piece of government paper, because that's basically meaningless. We see that.
What did you change your mind on that? What was your thought process before?
I guess I think a lot of conservatives do this, advocating for secular government marriage. Everybody just do it.
Oh,
Whereas,
okay.
like, if we're going to give people a piece of advice, it shouldn't be, well, just go get married. It should be, write yourself before God, number one. That should be the first priority. Why should we be encouraging people, like, again, who are atheists, leftists, who are like are promiscuous? Why should we be encouraging them to enter into what is basically a meaningless government contract? Like, do we really think that's going to fix things? And I think if we look at, like, especially like the Gen X generation and Boomer generation, where divorce is like skyrocketed, and where we have all of these like open marriages now, for like, that's diluting and perverting the meaning of marriage. We shouldn't be arguing for that.
Okay, so basically, put God first. Don't put your faith in the government, which is honestly, I don't know if they would say radical Muslim, but the hardcore Muslims that I've met, that's pretty much their belief. They call it the kafir courts. We shouldn't get married legally. Like literally, it's against our religion to get the government involved
Yeah.
in our marriage. We're just gonna get a short nikah. That's the word, and it's like takes 15 minutes in the mosque, and that's it. Now you're married, and
I think that I think that's fine.
that's the way to go. You see these like
Yeah.
loud. One thing that red pilled me on marriage, I think, was Islam, when it's like 15 minutes in and out. Like there's nobody. You have two witnesses, and then you become married. But in quick Christian Western societies, I don't know if you had this, but
15 minutes, bro? No, bro. It only takes a few minutes. Just 1 or 2 minutes. Okay, just you have to say, yeah, I accept that, accept that, accept that, and you need some family members around. Yeah, two family members around them, and they will be the witness for their marriage. Okay, that is a halal marriage, and and yeah, a man should give her mahar. It's called, I don't know what it called in English, but men have to pay that pay to her some amount of money. uh, you know, it's a it's a obligatory in Islam. If you don't pay anything, if you're poor, you have to pay. If you don't pay, I think God will ask him in the day of judgment, what why you didn't pay to her mahar. Okay, you have to pay. You have to pay her, and that's the responsibility of a man.
Like the Instagram marriage is a new phenomenon where it's pretty
Yeah.
much like a giant expensive ceremony for the woman to be the center of attention and get her big shine and moment. So she gets the dress, and there's the party before the engagement party and the bridesmaids, and it's all on it, and the flowers everywhere. All the families there. The husband has to go through the humiliation ritual. It's being recorded. They get a professional photographer. It's broadcasted everywhere. He gets on the knee. He opens a box. He has 1/3 of his salary. It's like every aspect of this is almost pretty much like a humiliation ritual to emasculate the man. And so the woman goes around parading this ring like, I got this guy. Like, I got this guy by the balls.
I think these things make those guys poor, broke. Okay.
Well, there's actually a positive correlation between your likelihood of divorce and the amount of money you spend on your wedding.
Really?
That's a real thing. The more money you spend on your wedding, the more likely you are to divorce. Like I
Huh.
was not at all surprised when I found that out because I think a lot of people they're getting married for the wedding. Like they're excited about the wedding
Uh-huh.
instead of the actual marriage. A wedding is one day. Who cares? It's certainly not worth going into debt over. What you should be excited for is like the partnership you're forming and the result of that. I was really lucky. My husband has a very large Irish Catholic family. And so we had been putting off planning a wedding because we didn't want to, I mean, do the logistics of it. Neither of us are big into parties or planning or anything like that. But then COVID happened. So we were fortunate enough where we were able to get married with 12 people. That was our ceremony. And it also saved us a whole bunch of money. And we didn't, and the most important thing is we didn't have to, like, we didn't offend anybody, any family members who weren't invited because we literally couldn't because of COVID.
Very fair. That was probably one of the best excuses ever. But
Oh, 100%.
wait, so where you're in Nashville, correct?
That's right.
So what is that like? How's Pride Month over there right now?
So I actually saw that Nashville, or sorry, Tennessee was rated like one of the worst states for LGBT people. Which is like, yeah, that's right. It's terrible. No one else move here. But there actually is a pride parade in Nashville. There's like a little festival. I went last year, I think, to try and film for it, and it was pretty degenerate. I mean, like you had like people giving away condoms and there were sex toys, but it wasn't
What?
anything like I think you see in San Francisco.
Balloon, bro? It's a weird thing, bro. uh, I've never heard of it before, bro. Honestly, I've never heard of it before.
When there's overt nudity, people dressed in bondage gear. So I assume in Miami it must be pretty crazy.
No, there's pretty much nothing. Like I haven't seen.
Really?
I haven't seen. Maybe I haven't, went out to look for it, but I haven't seen anything. I don't know if there's anybody in Miami in the chat, but New York, it was bad. I just came back from New York yesterday, and they
Yeah.
have all the parks are lit up with rainbow balloons now, and it's very that's like the hub in America with that. But Miami's fine. I'm just not looking out for it. What do you do to prevent your kids from seeing any of that stuff? That's what I like. I feel bad for the New York parents. It's like because I was talking to liberals, I've been interviewing them. I'm like, what do you think about Pride? They're like, oh, it's fine, And I'm like, well, what do you think the kids should be? Should the
It's
kids be
fun.
exposed to that? And like, well, the parents shouldn't take them there, but they literally have like avenues with dick balloons being paraded
Yeah.
through the streets, and it's if it's in the park, like you can't even you have to
What are you gonna
avoid
do?
parks. You have to avoid the dog
Yeah.
park. It's not like they're actively going out there. So maybe you just going to school or getting some ice cream, and then you stumble across some degens with dicks out.
Well, I mean, honestly, this is, and it's, I know this is for a lot of people, it's a huge decision, but if you actually care about protecting your kid from any number of just like terrible influences, you shouldn't be living somewhere like New York City. I'm sorry, but that's just a fact. Like the number of bad influences, whether that's crime, like pride parades everywhere, just progressive politics, the government infringing on your rights as a parent. that's all going to be so much worse in somewhere like New York compared to Florida, compared to Tennessee. And I mean, I'm even of like, I wouldn't even, I love Tennessee. I wouldn't raise my daughter actually in Nashville. We're out in the suburbs. I want to move even further out into the country. So, I mean, like I said, it's not easy to just pick up and leave. I know that. But if you're actually worried as a parent, you shouldn't be living somewhere like New York. You shouldn't be living somewhere in California. There's only so much you can do when you're surrounded by all of that stuff. I mean, you can't even, like coffee shops, even in a lot of these places, they have like rainbow propaganda everywhere. You can't shield your kid from everything if you're in an environment like that.
Is that the reason you want to move out further? You homeschool the kids, correct?
Yeah, well, she's young right now, but like she's not in daycare or anything like that. We want to homeschool throughout, or maybe do like a homeschool pod, which some people do, where you can, as parents, kind of split up topics depending on what people are interested in or what they're knowledgeable in. Like I would, one of my friends who lives here, her husband knows about coding. I would love it if like when my kids are older, if he wants to teach them about stuff like that, I think that would be great. My husband's really into history and philosophy. He would be happy to like take a lead on that. But yeah, that's one of the reasons. I mean, Nashville, like I'm outside in the suburbs. It's not anything like San Francisco or New York here, but still, you go to some of the coffee shops and ice cream places. For some reason, coffee and ice cream are super leftist coded. I don't know why. They're all socialists who make good coffee and ice cream, but you still see some places with like the trans pride flag. I don't even want my young daughter seeing that type of thing, asking questions that I'm going to have to answer. Like, oh, actually, it's not just a pretty rainbow. It represents, men who think they're women. That's just, I don't want to have that conversation earlier than I probably will need to.
Yeah, it's better to just avoid the topic whatsoever, because even if you explain it in like a truthful way, they're still going to leave that conversation with it rattling around their heads.
Yeah, and I think there's something about childhood innocence, which I know like ContraPoints, this like leftist YouTuber says isn't real. There is something pure and innocent about a child, not even being aware that that exists, not even questioning things like gender or I know like leftists are trying to get those conversations earlier and earlier, but I think there's something noble about shielding children from these conversations that, adults are all confused about, but kids aren't. And I think if we introduce these topics to them before they're able to fully understand them, we are just confusing them for no reason. We're adding stress that they don't need to know about.
And yeah, and confuse, and because children are pure, and it's just
Yeah.
it's corrupting them for absolutely no reason. It's one thing that I think about now, like when I have kids, how I'm gonna explain that. And I think you're right. Like you just have to try to avoid it as much as possible, and then that the more taboo and weird it becomes, like when they finally do learn about it, like, oh, that's fucking gay. That's gay. That's
Well,
the
actually,
proper response.
and that's something I wanted to ask Pearl, because I am curious about her answer. Like if men are the better parents definitively, and evil comes from women, does that mean that the perfect couple, the preferable couple to raise a kid would be a gay couple? Like two fathers? Is that like even better than a mom and a dad? Because it's double the best parent,
Maybe that's the
you
most
know?
red pill take ever. See, that's two parents
Maybe.
filled with testosterone and no evil women. And also, the red pill talking point is that men are better at nurturing. Maybe, yeah, that's what I'm saying. Like, that's why the red pill can
Yeah,
go too far, where, like, if you're so red pilled, you just become gay. But maybe that's the truth.
right. Right, like yeah, is that actually like what would be the red pill argument against that? Against two like base testosterone dudes just raising the kids? Like should we all be like signing up to sell babies to men now just randomly like this happening? Like is that not a problem we should be concerned about?
That's a good point. You see, there's no, like, evil women around. Nobody's going to be
Mhm.
corrupted. Nobody's going to murder your baby. You don't have to worry about alimony. You don't need to worry about child support. There's no abortion. You can't kill the baby. I mean, it's just straight up murder legally.
Yeah,
Th-
just two bros getting together, raising a kid.
Just
Wholesome stuff, right? I mean, I don't see what the argument would be against that.
two guys hanging out, being high value men, raising a baby together in a high
Yeah.
testosterone environment. That's a really solid point.
That's so
Not for
funny,
me
bro.
personally, but I do want to ask a red pillar about that. You did an interview recently with Keith Woods. What was that? I didn't get to watch that yet.
Oh, so I've been following Keith on I first found him on Twitter, and I've been like following him on Substack. I think he's really interesting. I think he's probably one of the best accounts on X. So we talked a lot about like Irish immigration, what's happening over there. They're having a lot of mass migration coming in and specifically affecting small towns where there's very small population. And then you add a huge number of migrants, and it's enough to kind of tip the scale where these small Irish towns feel like they're being overwhelmed. These are things that the Irish people did not vote in support of. We also talked about, I guess, like Zionism as well, especially specifically the TikTok ban.
Mhm.
There's a lot of people who were on board with the TikTok ban because, oh, we gotta like the CCP, like China and stuff like that. A lot of the negative sentiment around TikTok politically now is actually because pro-Palestinian messages are exploding on the platform, and it's not under Zionist
Free
control. So the
Palestine.
idea that it's to combat China and they care about your data, it's not really true, or at least that's not why they care about it now. When has the U.S. government ever cared about your
Really?
data or your privacy? It's because it's hard for Zionists to control the message on a platform like TikTok, which is why, I mean, Gen Z, who's predominantly on TikTok, is overwhelmingly anti-Zionist. And I think that like a lot of, I mean, even the ADL, like they've complained that they're worried about their long-term influence over Gen Z because of things like TikTok, where they're not able to censor, and control the algorithm.
That could be a reason why I was unbanned on Twitch.
Then they should ban all of these social media platform, just watch TV channel that they control that. Okay, and that's the thing they have to do, but they can't, because this is the $1 billion business, $1 trillion business. They can't left it, bro. They can't leave this business.
But I'm not sure why the CCP is so hard to be like TikTok. I have a really hard time getting uncensored on there. Pretty much like all the TikTok clippers, they all report that there's that's really difficult. So I'm wondering why they're against that. Maybe it's just like the basic conservative points that they're against, and the Israel Palestine issue they don't have a problem with. But speaking about
Well, yeah, I mean,
yeah, go ahead.
so if you look at the CCP, what they want is basically to sow discord in Western culture, and so being really, really pro woke absolutely does this. I mean, TikTok is like an amazing weapon. You're transing your enemy's kids. It's
Yeah.
perfect, causing societal downfalls. But if you look at, I mean, a lot of Asian countries, like they don't have a strong Zionist bent. Why would they care about pushing a pro-Israel talking point? It's not really beneficial to them, so they treat it like surprisingly more fair.
I live in Asia, but not Asia. We say Chip. I'm living in Bangladesh, and yeah, here is everyone anti-Chinese, anti-Zionist. Okay, anti-Zionism, because we are Muslim. Everyone is Muslim, but I don't know India. But many Indians Hindu. They are supporting Israel. Okay, is real, bro? Israel. Okay. Pakistan, Myanmar, I don't know, but I don't think, bro, what they're doing.
Than a lot of these other issues. So I think that's why it's one of the few platforms along with X where you can actually openly talk about this stuff. Or even X, though, ever since Elon went on his like public apology humiliation tour where he went like to all of these like Auschwitz and Israel, he even X unfortunately has kind of censored some pro-Palestine accounts.
I've been fine on there so far. Some people have a conspiracy theory that they're just trying to weed out, the anti-Semites and try to get people to say too much so they can ban them. But I've been good. I'm not sure who they're censoring. Who are you talking about specifically?
So there was some pro-Palestinian accounts that got banned entirely. I think the allegations were either what they were posting in terms of video. I forget what their name was. There was that one account that had a little chipmunk as her avatar. She was actually reinstated, but she was gone for a little bit. And I'm not even sure what the official reasons were. I think a lot of them were gradually like given their accounts back, but I think it was especially during a time where a lot of people were sharing video clips. Some of them were booted for whatever reason. I think the guys was like privacy, terms of service, but it was very like one-sided. A lot of people think that it was basically a Zionist effort to censor some of these accounts because it did happen after Elon basically bent the knee to the ADL.
And what about immigration? That's one that just popped in my head because we're both a product of Western immigration. I mean, well, the Eastern immigration to the West. and then like you're having a conversation with Keith about like the invasion of, I do empathize with the Europeans quite a bit. Like if you see images of Paris, and if you look at if you look how quickly the culture is changing, or even like I've seen videos of like Canada, like people getting off the train and it's just filled with brown people. And I really, in a way, I feel bad for the whites there that are used to having their own space, and then it's getting completely invaded by immigrants who don't even speak the language. But at the same time, it's like, well, I'm a product of that. You know, my dad came from Haiti, my mom's parents are from the Philippines, and you yourself, like, yeah, you've immigrated. So what is your position on
Well, there's a bunch
invasion?
of different things to talk about when it comes to immigration. Number one, it bothers me when the left acts as if all immigrants are the same. So you can't really compare someone like Elon Musk, who's a literal billionaire creating tons of jobs for Americans, to someone who comes across illegally and is a net taker from the taxpayers, right? These are two very different scenarios. So to kind of try to paint them as like, oh, well, if you want the Elons to come, then you also have to have the people who are disobeying the laws and also, being a net drain on the system. It's like, well, no, actually, these are two completely separate scenarios. The idea that we just logically can't distinguish between the two, or legally can't distinguish between the two, or economically cannot distinguish between the two. It's a total farce. You used to have merit-based immigration in places like Australia and Canada. I'm not sure what Australia is doing now, but like previously, Canada, it used to be pretty choosy about who could come over. They would screen people who had like university degrees. If you were a doctor, if you were an investor, it made it a lot easier to come into the country. The idea was you could have your pick of the litter. You're going to pick people who contribute economically. Now, though, if you look at a lot of the migrants, the refugees who are coming to Canada, they're actually a drain on the system. They're on public housing, they're on public assistance. So instead of, hopefully the immigrant coming and providing jobs, like growing the economy, this is actually a burden on the taxpayer. So that's the first thing. The second thing is that you have the question of numbers. In Canada over the past several months or maybe a year, there's been almost 1 million people come into the country, and this is a country that has 30 some odd million. So it is a huge increase, especially considering the fact that most of these immigrants are going places specifically like Vancouver or Toronto. That's the idea that if you don't want 100 people over in your house, you can't even invite 1 or 2 people into your house. That also, I think, is a false dichotomy that the left is trying to paint. Because for the longest time, countries like the UK, like the US, like Canada, there were people who were coming in, immigrants who were assimilating, who were doing so in smaller numbers. They weren't wreaking havoc on the housing market. They weren't coming in such large numbers that they were able to create ghettos where they don't assimilate at all. Like, immigration is not a new concept, but the levels that we are having right now, that is something that's new. And it is driven in no small part by the fact that a lot of the Western countries we're talking about are in population decline. So, right, most countries operate under a Ponzi scheme when it comes to things like providing retirement benefits for their citizens. Previous generations did not have enough children to sustain the number of retirees we currently have. So politicians have decided that the best way to actually, provide for those retirees is actually just to have more people. Therefore, all the numbers go up. Our gross domestic product will increase, and it'll be fine. That's not actually what's happening, because again, like the people in charge, they haven't distinguished between immigrants who are economic contributors versus takers. And so even though a lot of these immigrants were probably invited over in the hopes that they would spur economic growth and make up for the fact that we are in a population decline, they're actually doing the opposite. Like, our GDP may be going up in raw numbers because there's more people, but our GDP per capita, which is a much better indicator of like how wealthy or prosperous a nation is, like, it's not similarly improving, especially with inflation.
Ethnically, though, that's the one I resonate with. It's like they don't even have they can't have their own space. You could say that China is for Chinese, Japan's for
Yeah.
Japanese, but if you say like Europeans, if a white dude says Europe should be for white people or Europe should be for Europeans, everybody loses their mind, and it's very quickly changing. And I miss like the uniqueness of that, like how Paris used to be the artsy place where white people would like drink their coffee, and now it's getting invaded. What do you think the solution to that is, though? Because you make some valid points about about it economically.
Well, I don't think this is going to happen, but I think if we look at places like Canada and the UK, I think there needs to be mass deportations of the people who came illegally, or, I mean, the revocation of like people who are on temporary statuses. Like, we can't just keep renewing and inviting people forever. It doesn't work like that. I don't think that's going to happen realistically, especially like in the US, the number of illegal immigrants, I think, is some people estimate in the tens of millions. I don't think you're going to realistically remove all of those people, but we can at least start with, not allowing people to come illegally, limiting the number of people who can come over, to people who, if there's a huge need in the economy, maybe we can have that discussion. But I think it's gotten to the point, and this is like, that's the thing, mass migration, it hurts like people like me, because it makes, or even you, it makes people who look around and see their country being lost, it makes them leery of anyone who looks different from them. I think it pushes
That's
people
true.
too far. And I just don't think it's healthy or good for anybody. And I've spoken to my dad about it. He's sad because he moved to Canada like decades ago because he loved Canada and he wanted to experience Canada. It's not really possible for someone like him to do that in this day and age, because that Canada doesn't exist.
Then what exactly is the level of assimilation that immigrants should do? I'm sure that you've assimilated to American culture. My
Well, I
parents.
still use Celsius, so I'm not going to stop. The Fahrenheit is ridiculous.
What do you mean?
Like Celsius, Fahrenheit. So
Oh, okay.
Americans,
You
they
still
use.
use it, right. You still use, yeah, but that's the smallest. Other than that, like you're there in the suburbs of Nashville, like you're doing the American thing. One thing that I noticed from Muslims, which I didn't know before I reverted, is that there's some they believe in, not everyone, but a lot of the UK Muslims believe in something called the Muslim Caliphate, which is like they think that the world they basically want to change, not everyone, but there's a certain demographic that wants to change Western cultures to fit into Islam. It's like if you're gonna go to a place, you should probably try to fit into what it is. Like if I come to America, I'm going to try to achieve the American dream, not bring my dreams from another place and impose it on this land. That's what made America great, was that there was so much immigration around the turn of the century, and it fit into, like, Italians would come in and they would work hard, and they would, or like Cubans, even after the Cuban, they would come to America and fit it because of capitalism, because of the American dream. I saw you were speaking on a show recently about the American dream. What is the American dream, and how much assimilation should we do?
Well, I think you should assimilate as much as possible if you're moving somewhere. And that's, I mean, my husband and I have discussed, like, okay, if America like falls, where do we go? Hungary seems to be doing great. I don't want to have to learn Hungarian, though. And I know that if I were to live somewhere where they didn't speak English, I would feel obligated to learn their language. And so I really hope like English speaking countries step up, because I feel like, again, I'm too old to learn a different language. I really admire immigrants who are able to like learn English as well as a lot of them do, because it's not easy like learning a second language and getting good at it. But I mean, I think the American dream is to be able to basically have self-determination, to be able to get married, have a family, and raise them living as freely as possible, practicing religion as freely as possible. For a lot of people, I think if you live in a city, that American dream is looking less and less likely just because of how expensive everything is. But I think you can be Muslim and embrace the American dream. As long as you're not trying to make everyone else Muslim. And actually, I admire a lot of I did a video about Pride Month. In Canada, the biggest backlash to the pride degeneracy has come from the Muslim community, saying, like, why are you
Yeah.
trying to trans our kids? This is not acceptable. And there are companies like BMW or even Xbox who change their logos for pride for their Western accounts, but would never dare do it for the Middle Eastern accounts. I want.
Your mic cut out, Lauren. Lauren, I can't hear you. Oh man, Lauren, your mic. Can you hear me? Can you hear me? Yeah, your audio just cut out. I can't hear you. You probably can't hear me. Well, let me call you
Maybe
right
it's
back.
the
Let me
last
call you right back.
thing.
I think something disconnected from your end. Well, you guys saying so much better. So is that not what explain, Chow? What is the caliphate? I'm going off of this was the first time there was someone on the Woman a podcast that explained that. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Oh, okay, much better. I'm not sure what the issue was, but yeah, you were speaking about the American dream.
Yeah, did you stop hearing me?
Yes, I stopped hearing you. You went out for a bit.
I mean, basically, I just want, I want American, like, I want America, Canada, and Australia to be recognized on the same level as the Middle Eastern countries, with companies understanding that it's not socially acceptable for them to virtue signal over pride. Like, I think the American dream, like, the America is not really the same America as it was generations ago. And even though I'm critical of mass immigration isn't why that happened. Like, ultimately, the biggest problems in the West are internal. It's like, you can't really blame migrants for all the problems America has. America had, like, I mean, like, the downfall of America might be faster because of mass migration causing problems, but it's not the root of the problems.
So, where's the internal problem come from? Does it come from the installation of Judeo-Christian values just from America's inception? What's the source of the issues in the West?
So, Judeo-Christian values, that is a phrase I used to use as well.
Yeah.
I no longer do, because I've been, and it's true. That's a phrase that really only became popularized post World War II. Um, America is a Christian nation. It was founded upon Christian principles by Christian people, not Judeo-Christian people. And if you look at Christianity and Judaism, specifically rabbinical Judaism, they're very different religions. I would say that Christianity has a lot more in common with Islam than modern day Judaism, frankly. So, yeah, I don't think it's the Judeo-Christianness of it. Sorry, I forgot your question. I was
What do
hung
you
up on.
think the source of? Yeah, I understand. I like that you're able to talk about you changing your beliefs on Judeo-Christian values. But I'm wondering if that is that the source of the internal problems in America. Does it come from that belief that so many conservatives have held for hundreds of years of Judeo-Christian values, even though like it comes from the core fundamentals of the fact that Jews in the Bible you believe Jews killed Jesus and Christians believe Jesus is God, but in Islam that we believe that Jesus is a prophet and messenger and we love Jesus, right? So just that similarity alone makes Islam and Christianity more compatible than anything Judeo-Christian.
No, definitely. And there's also, like, Christianity and Islam are universal religions. Anyone can become part of it. It's not really like a racial or ethnic aspect. Judaism is very different. Um, there's a lot of, there are some Jewish sects that don't actually accept things like converts, because that's not really what Judaism is about. Like, if you read the Old Testament, a lot of it is based upon bloodlines, whereas, like, anyone can recite the Shahada and revert to Islam. Anyone can accept Christ and become a Christian. So I think it's a very different perspective that these religions operate under. Especially, I think a lot of Christians like to say that, Jews and Christians have a lot of common ground because we share, like, the Old Testament. But if you look at modern day Judaism, a lot of it is actually, like, it's not just based on the Torah. You have a lot. I forget what is the,
The
dang it.
Talmud
Yeah, it's a Talmudic Judaism is very different than the type of Judaism
and
that was
Torah
around when
Judaism.
Christ. Right. So it's, yeah, they're really not that similar. But I do believe that, like, what made America great is small government. But small government's really only possible when you have I think, a moral and pious people who are governed by God and some sort of, like, religious moral code. When you take away that religious moral code, I mean, society kind of goes the way it has been, right? We have people who don't have families, they're not being raised right. You try to make the government a replacement for family and church and community, but that doesn't work well either. So I would say a lot of it stems from turning away from religion, turning away from faith, and trying to rely on the state for answers.
Right. That's where the issues come from, is relying on the state for answers. It's putting the government as God instead of putting God first.
I think so.
Yeah. And where do you think that's the flaw? This is interesting. I'm wondering, where do you think the flaw in the state? Where did that start?
So I think it started with, so I love the Constitution. It enshrines a lot of important freedoms, but if you also look at it, it has been objectively incapable of preserving the type of freedoms and the limited government that the founding fathers envisioned, right? I mean, there's no end to the number of laws that exist today that are unconstitutional, that the founding fathers would be rolling over in their grave if they knew about. And even I think it was Thomas Jefferson, he admitted that the tree of liberty must be refreshed with the blood of like patriots and tyrants alike. I don't think the US government as it exists now was supposed to continue uninterrupted for as long as it has, because what happened is you have people who become entrenched in the system, you have old laws that never get repealed and just get built and built upon each other. I think that American people, like most Western people, have just become too apathetic and complacent. They'd rather live comfortably than live freely. They'd rather live safely than have try to take their government or their futures into their own hands, which is a very different attitude than the founding fathers have. So I think it's what happens with a lot of late stage empires. It's just that America's decline is happening much faster than it did with like the Romans.
But we still need to have hope. It sounds like maybe that's where we have quite a bit of common ground, is that you still, I don't know if optimistic is the best word, because that's like borderlining delusional, but you still have to do what you're supposed to do anyway. You don't. It seems like where we agree is that with the red pill vasectomy ideology, like you can't just be like this. Everything sucks. Yeah. You absolutely cannot do that. You're supposed to do the right thing regardless of the situation in front of you.
Right. And I think we have a moral obligation not only to God, but to our country, to our neighbors, to our ancestors who sacrificed so much just to get us here, to ensure that we had the opportunity to be born. We have to keep going. Like that's the only answer. And so yeah, I mean, I don't have a problem with all red pillars, to the extent that there are some problems that they're addressing that are real. Like, I don't think it's good for men to be disempowered in our society. I don't think, promiscuity on women's behalf, I don't think that's good. I also don't think it's good for men, but they have a lot of accurate diagnosis of like, hey, this is a problem. But if your end solution is going to be just like the leftists, where it's don't get married, don't have kids, get a vasectomy, then like, we'll know them by their fruits, I guess. I don't see you as any better ultimately than the leftists who are arguing for just, giving up, embracing degeneracy, all of that.
It's funny the similarities that you're making me realize, like, of red pillars and the leftists that they claim to be against, right? If you believe in that completely, then you're going to become gay. You're just going to be like, masculinity's like, it's just two dudes raising a baby because women are evil. Also the surgeries, right? The transgender surgeries and the vasectomy. Yeah. Not only that, the doomer mentality. Leftists, like the climate change activists, believe, like, they'll tweet stuff like, I don't want it. Why could you have kids in this day and age when you look at climate change? And that's the same ideology that like hardcore red pillars will have, like, why have kids if she's going to take all my money? So they think that they're against each other, but that's when polar opposites end up finding middle ground.
Right. Like if you look at what the prescriptions are, what the end result is going to be, the end result is going to be the same. You're not getting married. You're not having kids. You're living through materialism. You're engaging in degenerate behavior. You might say that your reasoning is different behind why you're doing it. But again, like, you're going to know them by their fruits. It's the same thing ultimately.
So what did you learn from that? I saw a bit of that Andrew Wilson debate. What was it? Because he's a Christian, but he seems like he agrees with quite a bit of Myron's talking points and maybe stuff that I talk about as well. Where did you change your mind on there?
Well, I definitely changed. Like I said, I changed my mind on the whole like marriage issue. Like, what even is marriage? Why are we arguing for marriage if it's not based on God? I think that was interesting. I will maintain. I think he's wrong about some of my own beliefs. Like I spoke about Nala, and he basically said that I was kissing her ass. I still think it's possible for an OnlyFans model to be saved. Does that mean that men should have to date her or that she shouldn't have to face social consequences? No. So I think he was I don't think he accurately portrayed what my video was about. And he also, he had an issue with me. Like I've been on stream with Destiny. We've had conversations. It's been fine. I think he thinks that I'm too friendly to people like Destiny. I have a lot of my audience who thinks he's too brash. I don't have a problem with how he conducts himself. I think there should be room within like the conservative sphere for also talking calmly to people. He was mad that I didn't call Destiny a cuck on our stream. Basically.
Well, yeah, I mean, that's where I just like, how is Andrew going to expect you to do something really masculine and like be aggressive and come out fighting it? That's not like, it's not in female nature to come in there and like argue and debate stuff like that. I disagree there. I do have to watch all of that. The one more thing I want to ask you about is what's been going on with the WNBA? You've been speaking about Caitlin Clark and all this stuff. I've not been tuned in whatsoever. What's your, as a woman in the West, what's going on with the WNBA?
So I initially, when I started hearing about Caitlin Clark, I actually thought she was trans, because it seems like
Who's Caitlin
anytime we're
Clark? Is
talking,
that a black woman, a white woman? That's a WNBA player?
she's white. Yeah, no, I'm gonna have to go soon, but
Okay.
so Caitlin Clark is a white WNBA player who's doing really amazing. Yeah, she's white, but she's controversial a little bit because she basically got kind of pushed over by one of the opposing team's players. A lot of people say that she was being unfairly targeted because she's so popular and also white. So it turned into a whole debate, but she's she's raised questions about the pay gap because she's an amazing player, but I think she was only paid around 70K by the actual league despite being as talented as she is. But then Nike came and offered her $28 million for some shoe deals. So I mean, she's bringing a lot of people into the WNBA, so you should be happy about it if you're a fan of the sport. But I think there is a lot of jealousy over the fact that, like, she's white. Apparently, she's more attractive than the usual WNBA player. She's also straight, which some people have a problem with. So it's basically just like identity politics.
Okay. All right. I'm sure you have your children, your family to get to. I don't want to hold you too long. Thanks for coming on, Lauren.
Yeah, thanks, and looking forward to streaming with you next week on my channel.
Yes, I forgot. Wait, so Wednesday, what day? So just next week in 8 days.
It's actually Juneteenth.
Oh, great. So well, I was going to be at a slavery protest.
Okay. Well, I mean,
I'm not going to be. I'm not going to be there. But
like, is that pro-slavery? Like, you're protesting the end of slavery? Like, I welcome all opinions. We'll have a fun discussion either way. But
yes, we're
yeah,
protesting the end of slavery. We want to bring slavery back, and I'm going to go protest on Juneteenth. But where are we going to be streaming that?
we're gonna be streaming on my YouTube channel, Lauren Chen. It'll be via StreamYard, so I'll send you a link. I know how that works a lot better than Discord, so
Yeah.
hopefully, we're usually pretty like error-free, and it should be a good time.
All right. I look forward to it. Thanks for coming on.
All right, thanks.
Bye.
See ya.
So this is the full podcast. You watched it, bro. I watched it. You watched it. Okay. Let's forget about those things that bad for you. Just remember those things that's good for you. Okay. So I have to go now. I have to do something more thing. Okay. Goodbye. And subscribe the channel if you want more videos like this.